We've talked on the YouTube channel about Immortals Fenyx Rising, and this is a title, guys, that was a very much pleasant surprise to me when I started playing it, sitting down, and started playing it on the Nintendo Switch. That's what the console I played it on, and I gotta say, guys, I was very surprised with Immortals Fenyx Rising. And when I say surprised, I mean in a very good way. And I want to talk in this segment of the show because I know there's been people talking about some of the recent comments that I made about Immortals Fenyx Rising in comparison to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I want to kind of just talk about it. I want to get your guys' thoughts about it in the comment section down below. I think this is a great place that we can have real conversation, guys. We're not always going to agree on everything regarding different games and the future of games and what, we think should happen in games that have been canceled, games that are in limbo states, states of no return, and, games that could get continuations and all of those different things, guys. We're not going to agree with everything, but I think it's important that we know that that's okay. It's okay not to agree on everything. That's what makes us human. That we're not going to agree on every little thing regarding, specific titles in the video game industry. It just isn't going to happen, and that's okay. And that's why I think it's great to have conversation about it. So in this segment of the show, guys, I want to talk once again about Immortals Fenyx Rising, but some of my reasoning behind my statement that Immortals Fenyx Rising, in my opinion, was a much better experience overall than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, we know, guys, that's an unpopular opinion. Many of you are going to disagree with that opinion if you played both games, but some of you might see where I'm coming from here. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, although it was well done, guys, it was obviously won a ton of awards. It did, incredible things for Nintendo, and now that franchise, looking forward now, it looks like they're going to have, they've got a number of probably future titles coming out in the Legend of Zelda realm. But my experience with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was not, it was pretty mediocre overall. Did I think the graphics were great? Like, I loved the feel, the vibe you got from the world that you were in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Absolutely. I loved the world. I loved being able to explore, and, just the story itself was very well done. I loved the story as a whole, but for me, that was kind of the brunt of it. That was really the peak for me, was being able to explore, being able to just be in this living, breathing, world, and just being able to kind of explore it and do little side missions and just enjoy it for what it was. But when it came to the main story and the quests and such, some of those quests were great, but I found myself, doing a lot of quests that my character wasn't upgraded enough for, or just didn't have the necessary tools necessary in order to combat some of the enemies I was going up against. And so it created a very frustrating dynamic for me in the way the combat was, the way that, the different enemies that, and having to upgrade your character and such. And, some of those things to me actually were just a little bit more complex than they needed to be. And I gotta say that it got to a point where it was very frustrating to get through The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And by the end of it, I was ready to put that game away and never touch it again, kind of thing. Immortals Fenyx Rising for me, which was such a better experience from a combat perspective. Now, what I'm going to say is the story, I like the story of Immortals Fenyx Rising, but I thought that Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had a little bit of a better kind of narrative. I thought that the voice acting in Legend of Zelda was a lot better than that of Immortals Fenyx Rising. But I thought that between the story, the characters, obviously, the world that you're in, I would probably give a lot of those nods to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but I thought Immortals still was like that kind of bright and colorful feel that I really liked. But the combat was night and day between Immortals Fenyx Rising and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I thought that the combat in Immortals Fenyx Rising was so much better than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that I could put this game on top of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild based on the combat alone, because the combat plays such a pivotal role in progressing through the story, progressing in this world, that it was such a crucial thing. And I felt that the same way with Legend of Zelda. I thought that the combat needed to be there in order for there was a standard there that needed to be there in order for me to say Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild just overall is better than Immortals Fenyx Rising. But it wasn't. The combat is just so much better. It's so much more fluid. A lot more exciting, and I gotta say that was really the breaking point for me when it came to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, was the combat. The puzzles and such were great in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Immortals Fenyx Rising, not quite as much. The puzzles and little side missions weren't quite as good as that of Legend of Zelda. But what I will say is that the overall narrative of Immortals Fenyx Rising, I liked it. Just as much really in a number of ways as The Legend of Zelda. There are obviously good things in each of these games and bad things in each of these games, but I just thought that for me, the type of gamer I am, I really enjoyed Immortals Fenyx Rising from a gameplay perspective to just an overall experience. I enjoyed it a lot more than The Legend of Zelda. Legend of Zelda I found was much more frustrating at certain points in time. Immortals was frustrating at times, but I like the different ways, the different types of combat. I loved being able to, just have the Zeus's wings. I think it was Zeus's wings. Being able to, fly. Being able to just use your bow and arrow. And even though you're able to use those things, similar, in Legend of Zelda, but it just felt different. It felt so much more fluid. It felt so much, cleaner and smooth. And that's something that really got me to really enjoy Immortals Fenyx Rising. And I think the thing about Immortals was that it knew what it was from a story perspective. It was a little bit goofier, a little bit over the top, and it knew what it was. And I really want to see a continuation of Immortals Fenyx Rising, or Immortals just moving forward. And I think that there's a lot of people that really also enjoyed Immortals in a pretty major way. It was a pleasant surprise. It was a very pleasant surprise to myself. And like I said, there's times, guys, on this YouTube channel that we talk about things that not everyone wants to talk about. We talk about StarCraft 3. Not everybody in the StarCraft community wants to talk about the continuation of StarCraft. Not everybody wants to talk about Call of Duty Ghosts 2, like the upcoming, or a upcoming potential game in the Call of Duty universe, because people have, bad thoughts of Call of Duty Ghosts 1. And this is a title that I always want to talk with you guys and be transparent as far as, how I'm feeling about certain games. And this is certainly one of them, that Immortals Fenyx Rising to me was a much better experience overall than that of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Does that mean Breath of the Wild was a bad game? Absolutely not. It wasn't. But when we compare these two that are very similar in styles, and obviously Immortals was trying to kind of be somewhat like Legend of Zelda. It's kind of like a lot of these games nowadays are trying to be kind of like The Last of Us, right? In the horror genre. Lots of games are trying to become somewhat like The Last of Us, like The Day Before, and a number of other titles that have come out, guys, in this space where they're trying to be like The Last of Us. We're starting to see now on the flip side of this, where The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was so well regarded by everyone. You got games that are coming out now that are trying to they're trying to compete against it. And I think that's a very good thing. I want to see the continuation of Immortals, though. I want to see more games in this universe. I want to see more ways that we can connect with the franchise, though, that being co-op and multiplayer modes. Because when I look at, games like this, after you're done playing the story, a lot of times you're not going to play it anymore. You might go and do some side missions and things of that nature, but most likely if you beat the game once or twice, you're going to move on to other games. So I think having co-op and multiplayer would absolutely keep you immersed in it. And it's a way that you could even one-up once again on The Legend of Zelda, having more modes than they do, obviously, to really appeal to the masses. So that's really my thoughts on it, guys. I'd love to hear yours in the comment section down below. What makes you like Immortals Fenyx Rising more than Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? Or what is it that makes you like Breath of the Wild more than Immortals Fenyx Rising? I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts about it in the comment section down below. And for more Immortals Fenyx Rising content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.